Hi guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to this video tutorial on implementing JWT refresh token functionality in existing Angular application with ASP.NET Core. In the last video tutorial, we finished testing the API methods that are required to create refresh tokens and create access tokens. In this video tutorial, we will start consuming these APIs in our front-end application that's developed using Angular. So go ahead and now open the app folder located inside the source folder in client app, and we will work on the JWT Interceptor.ts file. Now, as if you have watched the previous video series where we developed this application, I had mentioned that the importance of adding a JWT Interceptor class. The interceptor class was added so that any HTTP request that is made in our application that can be intercepted, and once it is intercepted, we will add the bearer token, which is the JWT token, to that request and then send it to the server. So if there is a JWT token in our local storage of the browser, we are going to attach that JWT token to the request and then send it to the server so that we do not get any unauthorized response back from the server saying that we are not unauthorized to view that particular component or product details. So the class that we want to first target or modify is the JWT Interceptor class. So here we will start changing the code so that here we can intercept the requests and attach our tokens, which are JWT tokens and the refresh tokens. So let's do that. So first we will get rid of this code inside the interceptor method, and we will write the code from scratch since we have to modify it. So we will create certain properties that we are going to use in our intercept method. So let's do that. So the first property that we want to create is the property that will hold the value of the token, the status of the token, whether it is uh, refreshing or it is already refreshed. So we will call this property as is token refreshing, and we will set the value to be boolean and initialize it to false. So initially the token is refreshing is false. We will use this because we want to wait for the response that we receive from our API call. Therefore, we will check if this value is refreshing, which means that the token is in process of refreshing, and we will wait for the value till it is returned by the server. Instead of throwing an error response to the client saying that the API call failed, we will first wait for the actual response. Now the next property that we require is of type behavior subject. To keep it short, I have already explained what is behavior subject in the previous video tutorials where we did create this application. So to keep it short, behavior subject is of type observable, and we use these because we can initialize their values. And the most important thing about behavior subject object types is that they always emit the current value of the object. So anytime the value of the object changes in your application at any state, and when some other object is requesting the value, it will always provide the current value of that object. So we will call this as token subject, which is of type behavior subject. It's going to be a string, and we are going to create a new behavior subject string, and we are going to initialize the value as null. So we have initialized the value of this object here to null, and you will see how we are going to use this as we proceed. Now in the constructor, we already have the required account service object, which we are going to use in the intercept method. Now, first thing that we want to do here is check if the user is logging in for the first time. So if the user is logging in for the first time, that means the user does not have any JWT or refresh tokens in the browser's local storage, which means the first request will be made. If the request is valid, the user will receive a JWT token and a refresh token, and that will be saved in the browser's local storage. So obviously when they are logging in for the first time, they will not have the token. So now in any case, whether the user is logging in for the first time or the user is logging in or requesting a new refresh token, we have to attach the token. So if there is a token existing, we have to attach it. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a method that will be responsible to attach the token with every request. So let's create a private method that can only be accessed by this class. Call it attach token to request. In this method's parameters, we are going to pass the request itself, which will be of type HTTP request, and it will be of type any kind of HTTP request. So this HTTP request object is part of the Angular /common/HTTP module. So make sure that you are using this and not HTTP client. Now here what we want to do is we want to create a variable that will hold the value of token. So you want to go to local storage dot get item, and when the user logs in, we are going to save this token inside the local storage with a key called as JWT. So if you go to the account service class, which is in services, you can see that when the login is successful, we save the JWT token in the local storage with a key called as JWTT. Now if you want to access that value, we are going to use the same key. So the way we set this key is using the set local storage.set item method, and the way we retrieve this value is by using the local storage.get item method and providing the key as the parameter. Now the next thing that we want to do, we want to return this token to the request. So what we want to do is return. So first thing that we want to do is we want to first clone this request, because initially the request will not have the token attached to it. We are first getting the token, but how do we attach it to the request, because the request has already been made. So what we are going to do is we are going to clone the request, means make a copy of that request, and then we will attach the token to the copy, because we cannot directly modify the request. So we have to make a copy of it using the clone method. And to attach the token, where do we attach the token? So if we are using a testing application like Postman, we will add the token inside the authorization. We'll set the headers, authorization headers, and we will set bearer token, and we'll set the token here. But in our application, what we are going to do, we are going to use the key called as set headers, and then we want to set the value of the headers. So what we do is for authorization, we want to set the value as bearer, and the dollar symbol, again curly braces, and token. Okay, this should be here. So this is how we will set our authorization headers in the application to attach the token. We'll call it set headers, authorization, bearer, and token. So this is not a quotation. This is the symbol on the tilde button on your keyboard. I think it's called as back quote. It's called as back quotation. So make sure you use this, not a single quote. It's a back quote. So that should be it for this method. So now we have to use this method inside the JWT interceptor so that we can attach this token. So let's do return and then we'll use our handler, HTTP handler, which is next. The object is called next, so that we can execute this request. Using HTTP handler, we will call the handle method, and then in the handle method itself, first thing that we want to do is attach our token. So to attach our token, this method here is responsible. So attach token request, and we need to pass the request as parameter, and the request comes from the parameter of intercept. So whatever request is intercepted by the intercept method, it is going to pass it here. This request will be cloned, and then we will add the token to that request. Now what we want to do here is we want to, after this request is the handle method is called, whatever is the response, we don't want to just throw it to the user, we want to handle it now, correct? So we will call the pipe method, and within our pipe method, what we want to do here is we want to call multiple methods. So whatever methods you call within the pipe method, they will execute in a sequence. So we call the first method here, second method, and then the third method. All these methods will execute in the sequence. So the first method that we want to call inside is the tap method. So the tap method, let's call the tap method. Now the tap method, the pipe method, you can add their references by importing them from the RxJS operators. So you can add the references over here. So I've added the reference to import tap from RxJS operators. I've also added a reference to import pipe from RxJS. So make sure you add the same import statements as I have added here, and do not import them from some other modules. So now we have the pipe and tap method. So let's tap on the HTTP event and then wait for the response. Initially this method was called as do, but since Angular 6 and in RxJS 5 they have changed this to tap to avoid the same method naming convention as JavaScript, because JavaScript also has method called as do. So to avoid that, they have introduced tap, and type is also pipeable, so you can also call pipe on tap as well. So now what we want to do here is we want to tap the request once so that we get whatever response so that we can handle it. So let's call the request. So if we are going to receive an event which is going to be a type of HTTP event. It can be any event, any HTTP event, can be an HTTP error, can be anything. So if what we are saying here is that we are expecting an HTTP event that is going to be returned from this tab. Now what we want to do here is we want to check if if the event is an instance of an HTTP response. If it is an event of an HTTP response, which means that the call to our API is a success. If this is an error, that means that the call to our API is a failure. So what we want to check here is if the event instance of HTTP response. So response can be 200, response can be redirect. So, but if there is an error, it will be 401, 404. So if there's an error, then we will handle that. But if it's a response, what we want to do is we don't want to do anything. If it's a response, it's good for us. We receive the token, we save it in the local storage, and then we consume it in our components. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to console.log success. So if the response is a success, I'm going to say console.log. So log on the console that it's a success. That's it. Usually I will leave it blank over here because I don't want to do anything because it was a success. Now what we want to do is the pipe method. The first method in the sequence is executing. The second method, if there is an error, then we will use the catch error method. Catch error method. And we will use this method to catch the errors that are returned by the HTTP request that we made. As we all know that if the response was a success, we are going to just print it onto the console and do nothing. But if it's an error, we have to handle it. So first thing that we want to do is import catch errors from our XJS operators. It should actually add it onto the import statement itself. If it doesn't, then you can add it manually. And now what we want to do is we want to pass the error. So I call this as error. I've used the word ERR. You can use it ERROR, but I've just called it error. And this error can be of any observable type. So guys, even though we are expecting an HTTP error response, the error response can be anything. So if there's a network problem on the client's computer, his Wi-Fi is not working and cannot connect to the internet itself, and there's an error, then that's not an HTTP error. That's something related to the network. So error can be of any type, not specifically HTTP. So we're saying observable type of any. And now what we want to do is we want to pass this error and handle it accordingly. So how do we handle this? First thing that we want to do is add an if else condition over here. So what we want to do is if this error that is passed to the catch error method, we are checking if it's an instance of HTTP error response. So error response can be of many type, can be 401, 404, 403 because access denied. So error response. So in this case, I'm just verifying two cases here. One is for 401 when it is unauthorized, where the user is not having an appropriate authenticated token, or it can be 400 where it is a bad request. So I'm just going to validate two conditions over here. You can add additional error codes and verify them as per your need. So to validate these error codes that we are receiving in HTTP error response, first thing I want to do is add a switch method here. Inside the switch method, what we want to pass is the value that we are going to, the value that we are going to verify against the different cases. So here we are going to say HTTP error response, and then the error, if the error is of type HTTP response, and then what we are validating is the error status. So status, as I told you, can be 401, 404, 400. So I'm just validating two cases here. First case will be if it's 401, I'm saying console.log. So 401 means that the token is not valid and the user is not authorized. We need a new refresh token, correct? That's the 401 error. So what we are going to do is we are going to first log on the console token expired, attempting refresh. You don't need to add this. This is just for readability purposes. So when we are testing on Google Developer Tools, we can see what's exactly happening when the call is made, and then we return. So what we want to do is we want to again uh, handle this request. We don't want to send it back to the user and then uh, log out the user because the user is not authorized. So in the case when the user is not authorized to visit products, we redirect the user to the login page. So here we don't want to redirect the user to the login page. What we want to do is we want to handle this 401 response that we got. So to handle this, we will create a method over here. So I'm going to call this method to handle HTTP error response. So this method will be called as, so once again a private method, can only be accessed here. It's called as handle HTTP response error. So in this method, what I want to do is, once again I want to pass the request which is going to be of type HTTP request. No, not response, request. It's going to be any once again. And then we also want to pass the handler, which is next. We'll call it next, and it is HTTP handler. So we are just redoing the same thing. We are re-requesting the token. So we have to create a request and then handler, and then we will handle that request. So we'll write the logic here, but we will do that in the next video tutorial. But for now, what we want to do is when we get a 401 error, which means our token is expired and we need to log back in according to the server to generate a new token, we are going to call the handle HTTP error response method. And what we want to do is we need to pass the request and the handler. So we get it from our main methods interceptor, which is request, comma, and the handler here is the next. So we pass the same request and handler to this method. So next, hope it didn't add anything. Okay, get rid of this. So now in the next case that I'm going to check is if it's 400, which means if the response is 400, HTTP error 400. So guys, if you are not familiar with what these responses actually mean, so I'll put this link in the video description. It's called HttpStatuses.com, where you can see different HTTP error codes and what they mean. So here is 401 0, which is a bad request, and 401 is unauthorized. That's the response we send back when we have received an invalid request from our ASP.NET Core. So we are just validating these two cases. You can add multiple cases depending on your application and your need. So for now, if it is 400, which means it's a bad request straight away return, and I'm going to call the account object that was instantiated in the constructor, and then we have a logout method. I'm just going to call the logout method and log out the user. Now we are getting an error because we are saying the observable response return type can be of any type. So it has to be of any type. So I'm going to say any. And now this should fix this error. Also, the next thing that we want to do is, if this error is not an instance of HTTP response, as I mentioned earlier, that what happens if there was some network related issue? It was not going to be an HTTP error, correct? So in that case also we need to handle the error. So what we want to do is, in all other cases, we want to return the throw error method, THRW throw error method, and it's going to throw the error, and we want to pass the error. So by doing this, we will handle all the errors, but we are getting an error over here, and that's because we are not returning anything here. We have not yet coded this method. Once we finish coding this method, we should get rid of this squiggly error over here. And also guys, in one of the video tutorials in the base application which we created, one of the users asked me that I told you guys that I will teach you how to handle errors in your Angular 7 application. So here, instead of throwing this error back to the browser of the client, we are going to create a global error handler that will handle the error and send the response accordingly. So what response we want to send to the user, we will send that response, not the actual error response. And I will show you how we can create this global error handler method and can use it inside this throw error method. So we will code the global error handler method, and we will use this method inside here. So I'll show you this in the next video tutorial. For this video tutorial, this should be it. And also note that when you have modified this JWT Interceptor class, if you try to run your application, might be it will not work. You'll get an error. So don't worry, because we have not yet finished coding this. We have to do many changes. Once we have completed these changes, the application should work fine. So for now, all we want to do in the next video tutorial is write the logic here to handle the HTTP error responses, and also create a global error handler method so that we can not only use it here in the interceptor, but in all other classes that you have created where you are expecting an error, you can use this method. So thank you once again for watching this video tutorial. Please like and subscribe my channel Tech Howdy. If you have any questions, use the comment section, and the code once again for this video tutorial will be available in the DevOps repos. Thank you.